Mr. Bolling, you have an illustrative cast of characters in your movie. President Jimmy Carter, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was his national security advisor, James Baker, who has played numerous roles with the first Bush administration, and also Brent Scowcroft, who was the national security advisor. So you got really engaged in the Middle East and in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in 1967.
Well, early 68.
Early 68, after the 1967
war. 67 war was over.
And what was it about the 67 war and U.S. policy that propelled you to that area?
Well, it was clear that things had come to a heading. The Arab cause had been very severely defeated by the Israelis. The Israelis themselves talked about a peace deal. Foreign Minister Abu Eban, for example, said Israel has no territorial demands. Israelis forget about that now, but at the end of the war, he said, we have no territorial, we want to make peace. Unfortunately, the Palestinian leadership was then in the hands of a rather flamboyant Palestinian lawyer named Shukari. Shukari was the main moving spirit at a summit, Arab summit held in Khartoum in the fall of '67, in which they agreed there would be three no's: no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. And so they were shutting the door. And yet, clearly, the door wasn't shut. And furthermore, the PLO was becoming more active again.
You interviewed Jimmy Carter in your movie.
Yes.
And of course, Jimmy Carter is very well known at this moment, not only as the former president of the United States, but because he wrote a book called Peace, Not Apartheid,
yes,
and characterized, if not Israel proper, at least the situation in West Bank and Gaza as a form of apartheid.
Which is a term the Israelis themselves use. The former Attorney General of Israel, an Israeli official, Zionist official, in 2002, wrote an article published in Haaretz in which he said, we fought a 6-day war because it was forced upon us, but on the 7th day we chose to become a colonial power, and we created an apartheid system.
Is there anything in your mind, at the moment that you are obviously accessing contacts that you have, former government officials, is there anything that you see within the current contours of Israeli politics, especially with the election of Netanyahu, is an indicator that the Israelis would dismantle the settlements which have become such a dominant factor throughout the West Bank? Is there any indication that you see?
I see no evidence that officially the Israelis are prepared to do this. But on the other hand, a very large percentage of the settlers themselves would leave and go back to Israel proper if they had compensation for their homes. Most of the settlers there are not ideologues. Most of the settlers there are not religious zealots. Most of them went to these settlements because it was a good deal. They were given economic incentives to go there, very favorable purchase arrangements, mortgage rates, all this kind of thing.
But as an extension of that colonizing of the West Bank, yeah, as a deliberate policy.
A deliberate policy.
It's a deliberate policy.
Yes.
Now, in the film clip, in the film New Hope for the Middle East, Jimmy Carter, former president, says the further expansion and the maintenance of the bases in the West Bank are, according to him, the central problem. And if we see no indication that the Israeli regime on its own will dismantle these West Bank settlements, how would the new administration go about it to force the dismantlement of the settlements?
That, as we say, is the $64,000 question. Nobody knows the answer to that question. Obama has his hands full of all kinds of problems. Is he able and willing to spend the political capital, which would be required?
Does he desire to spend the political capital?
Who knows? Who knows? My guess is he's a very realistic man. I think he knows that the settlements have got to be dismantled. You know, I did an earlier film, which you probably have not seen, called Searching for Peace in the Middle East. You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it, no.
Well, in it, I interviewed, among other people, Naomi Kazan, who was was Deputy Speaker of the Knesset. She's an Israeli intellectual, professor at Hebrew University, but a dove. She said, we have got to give up the settlements, and I mean all of the settlements. We never should have gone there in the first place.